You are not what people told you you were. You are who you choose to become. Welcome back to Unzipped Lips. Again, I'm your hostess, Mary Freshwater. And again, we are in a space where we get to unzip the truth and talk about the things we were never supposed to say out loud. This week is no different when we are looking at the labels that we carry, the negative narratives that have created them, and the places they most likely came from. I understand last week we talked about identity and how to have a healthy one. And we really dove into how we can have toxic positive identities that chain us to our past traumas and pain. So this week we're going to look at more trauma based identities that have come from labels and negative narratives because these three actually are very much related. You can't have an identity without a label first. And a label can't really exist without a negative narrative that was believed in. So here's the harsh truth. And I'm really sorry I'm about to say this, but you can't have a bad identity without believing it yourself. So you have believed a negative narrative that caused a negative label that now has become your identity. It cracks and boils down to the fact that we believed it. I've been there. I've done it. You're not alone. I believed I was broken for years. I believed that I was unloved. I was not worthy of love. As a child, I was actually suicidal because I did not feel like this world would ever love me. So when we look at this, it does all correlate because it is a negative narrative that gives us a label that then has an identity. It goes hand in hand, and it is something we have to believe in for it to exist in our life. So let's really dive in to how things all kind of correlate and how they work. And the biggest thing that I want to say is that the reason why I want to explore all of this is because you can't build a new identity on top of old lies, which are those negative narratives that you have been telling yourself, you have been believing, and you don't think that it's destroying you. It is because it is then turning into these things that you don't really see that they have become. So I want to start with what a label really is. Let's start there because then we can go back and forth on everything else a lot easier. So our the general definition of a label is a tag, a name, or a descriptor attached to someone or something to indicate identity, content, or characteristics. So this is where it really becomes a lot easier for me to paint this picture for you that a label is the interim in between your negative narrative and your identity. So when someone has placed this characteristic, this label on you, saying you have these characteristics or this is your identity, so you can see how it transitions from one to the X to the next. The hard part is you have to believe it in order to not stop it. It continues growing into the next phase automatically if you believe it. If you don't believe it, it just stops. It doesn't stick. It's not there. It doesn't continue. So again, it is a tag, a name, or a descriptor attached to someone or something to indicate identity, content, or characteristics. So again, if we can stop it once someone says the narrative and we don't allow it to become a label, it ends. It's when it becomes a label that it now starts transforming. So, and then the psychological or social definition of a label is a term or category placed upon a person that often carries assumptions, judgment, or expectations. So, examples laziness, broken, and strong. Strong, again, we covered last week. Again, it is a label that goes into identity that is chained to something someone has done to you or a negative experience. Now, if you're saying you're strong because you go to the gym and you're an athlete and you're strong as heck, by all means, You are strong, and that is a very, very, very positive identity, and it's not toxic. But now, if you're strong because you're talking about how strong you are from negative experiences, that is a toxic identity. Let me be very clear, they carry two different connotations. But what we want to continue talking on here is how lazy and broken, like the negative words that we all know are very much labels that we don't want, that have been imposed on us. Let's really dive into those because these can be self imposed, assigned by others, or influenced by culture or experiences. So, again, like I was talking about last week, experiences. This is the biggest one that we keep talking on because it is the biggest indicator of who and what lies are coming at you. The negative narratives are typically based in trauma. They become patterns, they become all this other stuff. And it's really hard to navigate through that. But when you start to understand like the main key characteristics of a label, then you can start to see what happened along the way. So when you're talking about the key characteristics, you're looking at labels can be descriptive or judgmental. Typically, they're judgmental. They often overly simplify the reality. So when I'm saying that, it oversimplifies very complex realities. So when someone says, "Oh, you're overly sensitive," it's like they're imposing something on you that they're failing at. They can't handle the fact that you have a lot of emotions. They don't want to say that, so they'd rather tell you something that is negative and not true than actually admit the truth, admit the downfall of who they are or what they have to offer. Just because someone doesn't have the bandwidth, that's not a negative thing. But when you tell someone else that they are at fault, that you don't have that, not just being honest, that is not right. And that happens by far more often than what we really admit to. And then also when you look at the labels, you start to see how they may actually influence your identity, your behavior, your perception of yourself. When you hear something enough, you start to believe it and you start to see yourself as that. So when people tell you you're broken, you start to act broken. When people tell you you're over dramatic or you're this or you're that, you start to become that if you believe it. So it it's hard to explain, but I'm pretty sure coming across because when someone tells you you're always broke, you're typically not very good with money because you believe you're not good with money. All right, that's the simplified one. But the last thing about labels is it can be empowering, like survivor, which we talked about last week, or limiting, like damaged. So again, labels are actually very, very toxic, even when they sound positive because of where they're coming from. And when we really, really look at all of this, it's labels can come casually or very cruelly. The thing is they stuck. And when they stick, that means you believed it. That's the harsh reality of all of this. So when it sticks, it means we're internalizing it and it becomes like a role. So, like the peacekeeper, for instance, you're the child who mom and dad were always fighting. So you were always trying to keep the peace, keep the siblings in line. And so you started adopting the peacekeeper, even though you're adopting this label in a very traumatized environment. And now you are always the peacekeeper and never dealing with why the fact you are a peacekeeper, or you're never dealing with where it came from. Why do you carry this title? Why do you carry this label? Because it's just like, have you dealt with why you have it? Or are you just gonna keep going with it? How about the rebel? The kid who just was rebellious against everything and no one knew that they were acting out due to the fact that they were being beat at home. Again, why were those behaviors there? Why were you becoming rebellious? Have you looked into that? Why were you being called a rebel? Or are you just a bad boy today? And I don't mean that in any book talk way. I am saying it as legit, like bad boy getting arrested, doing things we shouldn't be doing. And that, let's revisit the sensitive one. Why were you sensitive? Or were people saying that just to shush you up because they didn't have the bandwidth for you? You know, and the thing is we adopted these without asking, is this really me? We just allowed it to become our role. Labels often are actually given to us when we're children, where we really don't have the concept of being able to challenge it. We don't understand that we could challenge this because we're being told by the adults that this is just who we are and we have to deal with it. So these descriptions start becoming our definitions, but at the end of the day, these descriptions never have to define us. We can go against it, but we don't really understand that we can. And at the end of the day, like, let's be real, these labels are someone else's story about us that is now tattooed on our skin. And they were never chosen by us. The good part is you can choose them, but do you want to? That's also another question. So, how labels actually become our identity is when we really break it down is labels become so familiar, they start feeling like the truth. So, when you really think about that, like it is that comfy sweater or sweatshirt we all have, right? That we wear it here and there. It's not supposed to be a part of our wardrobe. It's just something that we wear, right? Now think about that comfy sweatshirt becoming a part of your daily life. It becomes your one thing you wear all the time. And typically it says you sink into depression that we all wear those. Let's be real. But think about that. Like this nice hoodie that brings you comfort because it's so familiar. That's kind of what we're talking about, is that these become so familiar that it's easier just to believe them and adopt them as truth than to define them. Then start making choices that match this label. Because again, a label is a characteristic. So this is how we start to go down that rabbit hole of it coming from a label to an identity. Is because now you're making choices. You are actually living your life upon this label, which now is becoming your identity. It kind of sucks. And then you start a self-fulfilling prophecy from there. Like I'm always a screw up because I guess I'll never get it right. I've never gotten anything right. Um, okay. Why do you believe that? Who told you that? Because that is pretty sure you've gotten some amazing things right in this world. So let's talk about that. Like getting you to a place where you stop wearing these labels. Because, if you wear something long enough, it stops feeling like it's clothing and it's just your skin. These labels were never supposed to be yours. They were placed upon you, and now it's your choice to continue believing these labels and these identities, which break down all the way down to the negative narrative you've been taught is you. So, where did these negative narratives come from to create this label, to make this identity, to send you down these rabbit holes of life? Like negative negative narratives typically come from family. Let's start there. You're the dramatic one. So when they say this, the actual translation should have been you express your pain and we didn't want to deal with it. So, like I said, it isn't your failing. It is the people that are imposing this on you. It is their failing, but they didn't want to admit to their truth. So they falsified what they're saying to you and giving a negative narrative with a label that it's your fault. And then it just goes down from there. How about school? You're lazy. What? And it's like school will say you're lazy because they didn't notice that you had ADD, ADHD, or you had other complications, or even notice that you were depressive or suicidal. And sucks because again, it's other people's lack of being able to comprehend what was happening, but they impose it again on you, saying it's your fault and giving you the negative narrative, which then goes into the label that you continue, and then you go from there. So, about church, sorry to my brother, church, community, you're sinful, rebellious, damaged. In actual reality, it's because you questioned their control. You question things that you're not understanding. So when you're questioning things, it's not because you're wanting to rebel and you're this horrific person. It's because you're questioning things to understand them because you probably genuinely want to know. But because you're saying this, you're told these negative things because someone doesn't have, again, the bandwidth to answer those, or you've proposed a question that they can't answer, so you need to be the bad guy because they can't answer it. So again, it is a negative narrative. It is a lie. It is falsehood being masked as your fault, even though it wasn't. Or relationships. Let's look at relationships. You're too emotional. You're hard to love. And this really comes from they should have been saying you had needs I couldn't meet. Again, that would have been the truth. But instead they didn't want to admit to their faults or where they lacked. And again, it became your fault. So again, I hope you see the pattern here of when someone imposes something upon you, it's not truth. It can be very negative. It can be very much a lie. And it's hard to overcome those when you keep hearing them because you're too much. Well, no, you weren't enough to be able to handle who I was as a person. And that is something I very much hear all the time, especially in dating, is that I'm too much because I'm sorry that I'm very ambitious in my life and I want to help people in a way that most people can't comprehend. So I hear that I'm too much and I'm like, haha, for you. Instead of believing the lie that they're trying to get me to suppress myself or dim my light, I'm like, okay, for you. Yeah, I am. Peace out, bro. But it took a long time for me to get to that spot. And it was me understanding the negative narratives that people were feeding me. I did not need to believe, and I didn't need to take on the labels that those negative narratives wanted to give me. Instead, I chose my own. But here's the hardest one out of all of them is trauma. Trauma that causes negative narratives. I ruin everything, which is the translation I had to blame myself to make sense of the chaos. When we're talking about trauma, it is so ingrained into us on all the things that happen and where the negative narratives come from and the false things that we're telling ourselves because trauma creates a false sense of self, especially when we're having to deal with things as a child. When we're having to try to keep the peace, or we are getting hit for no reason, or we have these people in our life that are supposed to be protecting us and they're the ones hurting us. There are so many negative false identities that come from that are actually also based in shame because as we get adult, we're ashamed of what we went through. And, our identity gets very based on that. And it's hard to break from that because these become like personality traits that are based actually in trauma patterns. They're not actually personality traits that are like indigenous to you, they're based out of trauma. And so then it becomes a story that we're telling ourselves. So that's that narrative part of the story that I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy of love. I'm not safe. I'm not heard. I am broken. And they just keep going. when they're based out of trauma, because whatever was happening, these are negative narratives we had to tell ourselves to make sense of the chaos and everything happening around us, but also other people are telling us this. That's the hard part, is we had other people telling us that you're not worthy of being loved, but the actions of our parents, they're telling us this. And it's hard to break through all of this because it's so much ingrained in us. How do we break from those patterns that have told us that we were not worth anything? And now it's our identity because it happened for so long and it happened as a child when we couldn't challenge it. So these stories live often in us because of other people that hurt us. And again, most of these narratives are because of others and their failures that were reflected upon us in falsehood. So when we look at the lies of these narratives, then we can start to break through and debunk our identity, break down the labels, and rewrite narratives once we understand that they're lies in their negative narratives, that we actually can control the narrative. We cannot control the story. Like, we can't rewrite our story. Don't get that out of your mind. You cannot rewrite your story, but you can change your narrative. And this is one of the biggest things I talk about, especially in Build You, is rewriting your narrative, telling yourself a different narrative. Your story may be messed up beyond belief. Don't get me wrong. I've heard horror stories. I lived through some horror stories. And at the end of the day, I am grateful for my story. Hardcore grateful for it, because at the end of the day, I'm an amazing person. I learned everything I don't want to be in this life. By the time I was 32, I had more lessons than a 90-year-old on their deathbed. And I am not mad at that because it helps me blossom into an amazing person that I am today and I will continue to become. So rewriting those narratives is what got me to this place today, doing what I'm doing for others. So breaking through those lies of "you're too sensitive, your pain made me uncomfortable." Let's rewrite that narrative right now. Your pain made me uncomfortable. That is what someone's saying when they said you're too sensitive. I don't have the bandwidth and your pain made me uncomfortable. Let's just put it out there. How about you're broken? Let's talk about that label. And like, that is one of the biggest ones. That was someone who didn't want to talk about how you can change and grow. They just rather not deal with who you are and what you're bringing to the table because it was too much for them. So we confuse survival traits as our identity traits. Like I said in the other podcast, our survival we confuse with ourself. And they're two different things. So we have our survival story and then we have who we are. And we get to choose who we are. Like, the power of choice is a powerful thing. Like, the most powerful thing you're going to ever have in this life is the power to choose in your decisions. And like, this is where I want to really emphasize that just because someone said something about you or decided this is who you're going to be, you don't have to be that. You can choose who you want to be. And like, that's not easy. It is so hard to let go of labels, identities, and negative narratives that we've held on to for so long, because we've worn them for so long. The question is who are we without it? Like I said in last week's podcast, who are you without these stories? Who are you without the wounds? Like, labels, narratives, all of this goes back to just that same question: is who are you? Who are you at the depth of your core? Who are you? So letting the feelings of loss and hurt go, it's again, it's so scary because we've been told in order to be strong is to not let your guard down, not be vulnerable. To be strong, you don't be vulnerable. I'm sorry, but again, I've said this before, vulnerability is the biggest flex anyone can have. The biggest flex anybody can have is being vulnerable, because it takes so much strength to be rejected on a level that others can't even comprehend. But you know what? Today, I'd rather be rejected for who I truly am than a false person, because then you're left with other questions. Let's be real. If someone rejects you because of the false person, and then you're going down a rabbit hole of if they only knew who I was. All right. Well, I'm sorry. But let's look at who we are, being vulnerable, and allowing ourselves to let go of all of the labels, all of the narratives, and really strip it all away and look at your story and start looking at it as a positive. So I've said before, and many people have heard me say this, that you can find positive purpose in negative experiences. And that's how you start rewriting your narrative. You start rewriting it when you start to really go and dig in and see the positive purpose in negative experiences. And the most horrific one I have is I have a brother who passed away. I was 37. No, I'm sorry. I was 35. He was 37 when he died. And he had an aortic artery rupture. So, inside his chest cavity, his artery just literally split open. He bled out internally and he had died before he was on the ground. And the horrificness of this 37-year-old man dying with 3 kids and a wife. Yet within months, we found out it was a genetic disorder. And my little brother and little sister both have it. And a couple years later, we found out his own son has it. So now we are aware of this and we can correct it, and people can have long lives because of this tragedy. But again, there is so much positive purpose in this horrific experience. Like, I like to use that analogy because it's just so like apparent. And when we look at our stories and we're needing to rewrite our narratives, it's okay to struggle at first. But the question is what did you learn you didn't want to become is the best place to start with changing those negative narratives to rewrite the labels and to help you build a different identity. So, who are you without the labels? Who are you without those negative narratives? Who are you when you start to look at yourself and everything in a very positive light? Because you're not broken. You're not. You went through some horrific stuff, but it didn't break you. You're still here. Be be happy about that. Be be proud of that fact. You are still here after everything you have survived. So when you start to rewrite those narratives, look at it as what is positive. I know that's so hard to do, but that's how you start rebuilding. Your identity isn't about what you survived, it's what you're going to decide from here on. So, with rewriting the narrative, let me give you a few examples. I was told I was a nuisance, but I'm learning I actually was an energetic child. It's seeing the truth in the narrative. I used to believe I was broken, but now I understand that I was being built. Because when you really think about it, like what didn't break you has been creating an amazing person on the other side as long as you go and build that person. So start reframing everything on truth. And instead of this blind positivity and these negative narratives, start building you on truth and really rewriting that narrative, because that story can't change. The narrative that you're telling yourself can. And you can really detox from these labels. And so I want to give you a detox challenge of really kind of bringing yourself away from these identities, these narratives, these labels, and really start to push them out and get rid of them. So write down 3 negative labels or identities that you have internalized and really start to dive into it. Like, who gave it to you? First off, was it yourself? Was it a parent? Was it a friend? Where did it come from? So this label, this identity that you're carrying, where did that come from? Why did you accept it? So that is going to be really hard because that is so much self-reflection on why are you believing this about yourself? What part of you might have been misunderstood or mislabeled? So really now, like, too sensitive one is just an easy one to look at. Like, were you misunderstood? How were you being dismissed? Did someone else not have the bandwidth? What was really happening that just totally derailed it? Now, what would it feel like to let go of that label and to really like release it and not live by it anymore? What do you think it would feel like? So I want you to really look at these questions and really go through that over and over with different things so you can start disbanding and figuring out the root cause of these labels and these negative narratives that are creating these identities that you don't need because you're an amazing person and you have every right to show the world that. It's time to wash it all away because it was never yours to carry because someone else imposed it on you. So, I want to leave you with some final thoughts here that one, first off, you are not your trauma. You are not your past. You are not the labels they gave you when they didn't understand you. All right. Like, please believe that. You are the contractor, the constructor. You are the builder of you. This negative world's created our story. This negative world has created parts of us. But guess what? You get to build who you want to become. And you are the most powerful thing in your life. The most powerful thing you have is your decision and your choice on who you want to become. And so, like, I am so excited to see the version of people that are going to be coming out of this, that are going to start understanding and opening up their eyes and wanting to build their own identity and to build a person that is no longer misunderstood. So, you get to build you. You get to build the version of you want to be and stop listening to everyone else. So, again, thank you for unzipping with me today. Check out my website, buildyou.us, so you can look at ways of working with me, even if it's to rebuild an identity and to break through these barriers. I invite you to come talk with me. Let's have a discussion and see how I can help you. And I'll see you on the next episode.